There are some moments in royal history that are carefully planned, rehearsed, and announced to the world. They arrive with official statements, perfectly chosen photographs, and carefully prepared words from palace officials. But then there are other moments. Moments that happen quietly, away from cameras and away from public attention. Moments that are not created by a communications team or designed for headlines. They happen because of love, memory, and a simple human connection that cannot be staged. And sometimes, those are the moments that touch people the most. On what would have been Princess Diana's 65th birthday, Britain witnessed a moment that reminded millions why her memory continues to hold such a powerful place in people's hearts. It was not a grand ceremony. It was not a major royal announcement. It was something far more personal. A young girl, carrying Diana's name, discovered a small detail about her grandmother's life, and decided to honor her in the most innocent and heartfelt way imaginable. That girl was Princess Charlotte. And what happened next left many people emotional because it showed that Diana's legacy was not just preserved in photographs, documentaries, or history books. It was living on through the next generation. Princess Diana was born Diana Frances Spencer on July 1, 1961. Throughout her life, she became one of the most recognized and beloved figures in the world. She was admired for her compassion, her willingness to challenge tradition, and the way she connected with ordinary people. But July 1, 2026 carried a unique sadness. It marked what would have been Diana's 65th birthday. A milestone she never reached. Diana died tragically in Paris in 1997 at just 36 years old. She never experienced many of the moments that would have defined the later chapters of her life. She never watched her sons become husbands. She never held her grandchildren. She never saw the little girl named Charlotte Elizabeth Diana growing up and carrying a part of her legacy. The thought of what Diana missed has always been one of the most heartbreaking parts of her story. She never got to meet Prince George, Princess Charlotte, or Prince Louis. She never had the chance to become the grandmother many believe she would have been, the kind of grandmother who filled a room with warmth, laughter, and affection. And that is what made this birthday different. Because although Diana was not physically present, her memory was. For years, the royal family has approached Diana's legacy carefully. Her life represented both extraordinary achievements and deeply painful personal struggles. She remains a figure loved by millions, but also someone connected to one of the monarchy's most difficult periods. Because of that complexity, official royal tributes have often been measured and cautious. There was no major public ceremony. No dramatic announcement. No carefully produced tribute designed to dominate headlines. Instead, something much more meaningful happened inside the private world of the Wales family. A family moment. A grandmother remembered through a granddaughter who never had the chance to know her. In the weeks leading up to Diana's birthday, Princess Charlotte had reportedly become increasingly curious about the woman behind the photographs. Like many children reaching a certain age, she began asking deeper questions. Not just simple questions about who Diana was. She wanted to know the person behind the title. What was Diana like when she was not a princess? What made her laugh? What did she enjoy? What small things made her happy? These are the questions children ask when someone becomes real to them. Because to Charlotte, Diana was not a memory she personally experienced. She was a grandmother she knew through stories, photographs, and the love of the family members who remembered her. For Prince William, sharing Diana's story with his children has always been something deeply personal. William was only 15 years old when he lost his mother. The world watched as he and Prince Harry walked behind Diana's coffin during her funeral procession, carrying unimaginable grief in front of millions of people. It was a moment that defined his childhood. But as a father, William wanted something different for his own children. He did not want Diana to become only a tragic historical figure. He wanted George, Charlotte, and Louis to understand her as a person. A mother. A grandmother. A woman who loved simple things. A woman who cared deeply about others. Along with Catherine, William chose to introduce Diana's memory naturally. Instead of turning her into a formal lesson, they allowed her to become part of everyday family conversations. And eventually, Charlotte reached the age where she wanted to understand more. One of the most touching details shared about Diana was not about royal events, famous photographs, or international headlines. It was something much smaller. Something ordinary. Diana had a habit of preserving flowers by pressing them between the pages of books. A simple act. A quiet, personal tradition. But perhaps that was exactly why it mattered. Because it showed Diana not as a global icon, but as a real person. Someone who noticed beauty. Someone who wanted to preserve a small piece of a special moment. And when Charlotte heard about this small habit, she reportedly wanted to try it herself. Not because she was instructed to. Not because it was part of an official tribute. But because she wanted to feel connected to someone she had never met. That afternoon, in the garden, Charlotte carefully selected flowers and placed them between the pages of a book. A simple gesture. Yet for those who understood the meaning behind it, it represented something much bigger. A granddaughter reaching across generations. A child discovering a connection to a grandmother she never knew. A legacy continuing in the quietest way possible. There were no cameras capturing the moment. No official announcement telling people what it meant. Just a young girl learning something beautiful about Diana and choosing to carry it forward. And perhaps that is exactly the kind of tribute Diana herself would have appreciated. Throughout her life, Diana was never at her most powerful because of titles or royal ceremonies. She was powerful because of personal connections. She was remembered for holding hands with people others ignored. For visiting hospitals. For supporting charities. For making people feel seen. She understood that small gestures could have enormous meaning. And decades after her death, her granddaughter unknowingly reflected that same spirit. Charlotte's action was not about being royal. It was about being human. It showed that Diana's influence was not limited to the past. It continued through the values she passed down to her children and grandchildren. For William, watching his daughter connect with his mother in such a personal way must have been an emotional experience. Because in that moment, he was not the future king. He was simply a son watching his child discover the woman he lost. And for millions watching from afar, the moment represented something universal. The way families keep loved ones alive. Not only through important anniversaries or official memories, but through small habits, stories, traditions, and little pieces of who they were. Because sometimes the strongest legacy is not found in grand monuments. It is found in the smallest things. A flower, a book, a memory passed from one generation to another. And on Diana's 65th birthday, Princess Charlotte reminded the world that some connections never truly disappear. The most powerful legacies are often not the ones written in history books. They are the ones carried quietly inside families. They exist in the stories parents tell their children, in the traditions passed down through generations, and in the small moments that remind us that love can survive even when someone is no longer physically present. And that is exactly why Princess Charlotte's simple gesture created such a strong emotional reaction. Because it was never really about flowers. It was about connection. It was about a young girl discovering that the grandmother whose name she carries was not only a princess known around the world, but also a person who enjoyed simple, peaceful moments. A woman who saw beauty in ordinary things. A woman who preserved memories through something as delicate as a flower placed carefully between the pages of a book. For Charlotte, this was not just a story about Diana. It was a way of understanding her. And for Prince William, it represented something much deeper. For nearly 3 decades, William has carried the memory of his mother while also trying to protect his own children from the painful circumstances surrounding her death. He knows what it feels like to lose someone too soon. He knows what it feels like when the entire world remembers your loved one while you are still trying to understand your own grief. That is why introducing Diana to his children was never simply about telling them who she was. It was about helping them understand why she mattered. William has often spoken about wanting his children to know Diana naturally. Not as a distant historical figure. Not only as the famous princess whose photographs appear everywhere. But as their family. Their grandmother. Someone who belonged to their story. And Charlotte's reaction showed that this approach had worked. She did not see Diana as a statue or a symbol. She saw her as someone real. Someone who had favorite things. Someone who enjoyed small moments. Someone who pressed flowers between book pages. That detail might seem insignificant to some people, but sometimes the smallest details are the ones that bring someone back to life. Millions around Britain understand this feeling. Because every family has memories like these. A recipe passed down from a grandparent. A phrase someone always used. A song that instantly brings back memories. A small habit that continues long after the person who created it is gone. These are the things that keep people alive in our hearts. And that is why Charlotte's gesture touched so many people. It reminded the public that Diana's story was not only about her royal position. It was about the human being behind the title. The woman who changed the way people viewed the monarchy. The woman who believed compassion mattered more than status. During her life, Diana became famous for breaking barriers between royalty and ordinary people. She hugged children suffering from illness. She sat with people affected by HIV and AIDS when many others were afraid to even approach them. She walked through minefields to raise awareness of the dangers faced by communities around the world. But perhaps her greatest impact came from something much simpler. She made people feel noticed. She showed that kindness did not require a grand stage. Sometimes, it only required showing up. And decades later, her granddaughter reflected that same spirit. Charlotte's flower tribute was not a public performance. It was not created to generate attention. It was a personal moment. A child finding her own way to honor someone important. That authenticity is what made it powerful. In a world where royal events are often surrounded by cameras, headlines, and public expectations, this moment felt different. It felt real. There was no speech, no ceremony, no official announcement explaining what people should think. Just a granddaughter remembering a grandmother. And perhaps that is why so many people felt emotional. Because Diana herself always valued genuine moments over perfection. She was at her most memorable when she stepped away from royal formality and connected with people directly. She understood emotions. She understood vulnerability. And she understood that small acts of kindness could create lasting memories. Princess Charlotte's gesture carried that same message. It showed that Diana's legacy was not only preserved through museums, photographs, or documentaries. It was alive in the next generation. A new generation that never met her but still feels connected to her. Charlotte carries Diana's name as part of her full identity, Charlotte Elizabeth Diana. For years, that name represented a beautiful tribute from William and Catherine. But as Charlotte grows older, it may become something even more meaningful. Because a name is not just something written on official documents. A name carries stories. It carries emotions. It carries the hopes and memories of those who came before. And now Charlotte is old enough to begin discovering the person behind the name. She is old enough to ask questions. Old enough to understand that Diana was not perfect, because no human being is. She was a woman with extraordinary strengths, personal struggles, incredible compassion, and a desire to make a difference. That fuller understanding is perhaps the greatest gift William and Catherine can give their children. Not a perfect image. Not a carefully edited version. But a real story. A story about love, courage, kindness, and humanity. The reaction from the public showed just how deeply Diana's memory remains connected to people. Many who heard about Charlotte's gesture were reminded of their own loved ones. They remembered grandparents they had lost. They remembered family traditions that continued. They remembered the little things that carried the biggest emotions. Because everyone understands what it means to miss someone. Everyone understands the desire to keep a person's memory alive. And that is what made this royal moment feel so personal. It was not only about Diana. It was about all of us. It was about the people we carry with us even after they are gone. The people who shaped us. The people whose influence continues through the choices we make. Diana once said that she wanted to be remembered not simply as a member of the royal family, but as someone who touched people's hearts. And in that sense, perhaps this moment was the perfect tribute. Not a grand event. Not a carefully planned celebration. But a child sitting quietly in a garden, preserving flowers because her grandmother once did the same. A small act. A powerful message. A reminder that love can travel across generations. Diana never reached 65. She never saw the world change in the ways it did after her passing. She never met the grandchildren who would one day carry her memory forward. But through William, Catherine, and especially through Charlotte, a part of her continues. She lives in the stories told at home. She lives in the values passed down. She lives in the compassion her family continues to show. And she lives in moments like this. Moments that prove a person's legacy is not measured only by what they achieved during their lifetime. It is measured by what remains after they are gone. A flower pressed between the pages of a book. A story shared from mother to daughter. A granddaughter discovering a connection to someone she never met. That is how memories survive. That is how love continues. And on what would have been Princess Diana's 65th birthday, Princess Charlotte reminded Britain and the world of something powerful. A person may leave this world, but the love they gave can continue for generations. Because Diana's story did not end in 1997. It continues every time someone remembers her kindness. Every time someone chooses compassion. And every time a new generation learns why she mattered. The chapter of Diana's life may have closed, but the legacy she created is still being written. And perhaps the most beautiful part is that the next pages are now being written by those who never had the chance to meet her, but who still feel the impact of her love.